Sometimes the enemies you meet in your life are not only monstrous or twirling their mustaches, they are sweet, familiar, and as close as family, but behind your back they are working against you. For such people, the term stab in the back is often used in Naruto. I believe this role fits Hiruzen Sarutobi, who is widely considered Konoha's kindest Hokage. I know most of you may not agree with me, but I definitely have clear evidence to support my judgment in this video. I'm going to share why I believe that Hiruzen Sarutobi is Naruto's biggest fraud and the reason behind that claim. So grab some popcorn and let's get started. Hiruzen Sarutobi is famously known as a professor because he was reputed to have mastered an enormous breadth of Konoha's techniques. Not only that, based on his personality and reputation, he was also celebrated as the god of shinobi and even considered the strongest of the Hokage. Let me make this clear. All of these titles were reputed. His reputation was massive, but in reality, his talents were far more limited, and I do not make claims without proof. When Orochimaru disguised himself as the fourth Kazekage and attacked during the Konoha Crush, his objective was clear: to destroy Konoha and defeat the Hokage. I will not sugarcoat it by saying that Hiruzen actually won, because of what we saw from Hiruzen's side was mostly basic techniques. A man who was allegedly versed in all of the Konoha's jutsus fought using a relatively small toolkit. While his techniques were somewhat powerful, they did not reflect the legend built around him. He was the one everyone looked up to, and yet he ended up defeated, or more accurately, no longer alive. Hiruzen's legacy is that of a wise elder and compassionate leader and a symbol of the will of fire. In reality, this reputation was derived extravagantly from only a few actions. He was called the god of shinobi, but where was this god all this time? We never truly saw it, and I may be blunt, but unlike other Hokage, his region lacks a defining achievement. Hashirama founded the village. Tobirama built its institutions. Minato saved it from annihilation. Tsunade rebuilt it after devastation. Naruto transformed it into ideology. But what did Hiruzen do? He merely presided, and under his watch, Konoha suffered from internal eradication, child experimentation, planned genocide, and systematic neglect of vulnerable children. He played the role of a kind grandfather, yet the children lived in misery and poverty right under his nose. People always looked up to him, and he wanted them to think of him as good as possible, so they would not notice or question disasters happening during his rule. Ironically, his image never cracked, and I will not blame him entirely for that. But ultimately, this was a failure of leadership masked by reputation. One major example of Hiruzen's frauds, in my opinion, is the Uchiha massacre. Let's be clear, he did not directly order the massacre, but he allowed the conditions that made it possible. After the Nine Tails attack, the Uchiha clan was suspected and politically pushed aside. They were relocated, isolated, and constantly monitored. What did Hiruzen do in response? He talked about negotiations, but those talks went nowhere. Hiruzen never offered the Uchiha anything meaningful, and from what we see, he never truly intended to give them what they deserved. The discussions kept getting delayed, and nothing changed for the clan. Hiruzen later claimed that Danzo acted without his knowledge, which is classic political manipulation. In reality, Hiruzen knew what was happening. He was aware that Danzo was planning something extreme against the Uchiha, yet he did not remove Danzo, shut down Root, or take the rear step to protect the clan. Instead, he chose to wait and watch. At one point, when it became clear that the Uchiha were planning a warp, Hiruzen told Danzo to make preparations. That line alone shows that Itachi's mission was planned in advance, even if the massacre was treated as a last resort. It was still premeditated. When Hiruzen arrived after the massacre, all he did was scold Danzo. That reaction proves he already knew that was coming. Yes, Danzo carried it out, but Hiruzen allowed the gun to be loaded. In the end, Danzo took the blame and became the villain, while Hiruzen stayed in power as the respected Hokage. What makes this worse is that Hiruzen did not condemn Itachi the way he did Danzo, that he thanked Itachi and called it an inventable solution. That tells us that they were already working towards this outcome. The series tried to present Hiruzen as a savior in this incident, but from my perspective, perspective, his hands were far from clean. If you look at it this way, you might not fully agree with me. You cannot deny that Hiruzen played as much bigger role than people like to admit. Another hidden aspect of Hiruzen that I personally think is misunderstood is his role in raising Naruto. When Minato and Kishina died, they asked the Third Hokage to look after Naruto. Hiruzen agreed wholeheartedly that was a good step, and I appreciate that. But honestly, that's where the appreciation ends. In reality, he failed to truly take care of Naruto. Naruto grew up alone and barely any meaningful support from Hiruzen. He was ostracized throughout his childhood and deprived of the normal life every child deserves. So the question is why. Many people argue it was for Naruto's safety, but I don't agree. Hiruzen was a Hokage, and he had the power to change Naruto's situation if he truly wanted to. His intentions may have been good, but the results were disappointing. Hiruzen created the illusion that he cared for Naruto like his own grandson, but when you compare Naruto's upbringing to Konohamaru's, who grew up surrounded by family protection and guidance, the difference is painful. Naruto received none of that. This doesn't mean that Hiruzen hated Naruto or feared him, replacing anyone, but he clearly mistook the symbolic protection for real protection. Visiting occasionally and offering kind words is not the same as providing real consent care. In that case, he truly failed Naruto, and I'm done falling for so-called kindness. Even when he says, "I'm too kind for this world," jokes apart, he really was extremely forgiving, but even forgave Orochimaru for illegally experimenting on children. Let me rewind a bit. Orochimaru kidnapped nearly 60 children from his own village to experiment with Hashirama's DNA. That number is huge, and when he got caught, what did Hiruzen do? He simply let him escape because he couldn't bring himself to kill his former student, despite knowing it was his duty. Honestly, he was only thinking about Orochimaru and his own emotions. What about those 60 children who were abducted and then the trauma of their family suffered and caught him red-handed? So there was no doubt involved at all. Hiruzen believed the village had its dark side, but that children were its future. Yet what he did to the destroyer of that future is honestly questionable. And when Orochimaru was given another chance, what did he do? He continued killing countless innocent people. He even created a sound village to conduct human experiments and killed hundreds of Konoha ninja and eventually killed Hiruzen himself. If you think Hiruzen isn't to blame, I digress. He was the leader who should have stood for justice, but instead he followed his emotions and ended up paying the price. If he had truly acted like a leader, countless lives could have been saved. As much disaster could have been prevented. And how can we forget what Danzo did? While Hiruzen once again remained silent and the public suffered, this falls under the category of the "I really didn't know" defense. But how can a leader not be aware of what's happening in his own territory? And if that does happen, isn't that a failure of his government? He failed to manage Danzo's actions. He allowed Danzo to operate his unlethal root organization without oversight. This unchecked power enabled Danzo to commit countless atrocities, including training emotionless child soldiers for unauthorized assassinations. Despite knowing all this, Hiruzen never brought Danzo under control, which is shameful. In Hiruzen's case, I've noticed a recurring pattern. In his role, when things go right, he and his wisdom are praised. When things go wrong, he either didn't know or couldn't act. For example, he didn't know it was still operating, and because of that, the public suffered. When students succeed, it's because Hiruzen taught them when the village is attacked, it's an unavoidable tragedy. When massacres happen, it's "I tried my best." And when someone questions him, if you don't understand or how hard leadership is, Boruto's communication style is more visible than my parents. Jokes aside, at some point, the ignorance stops being an excuse and becomes incompetence. Either he knew and failed to stop it, or he didn't know at all. But neither supports his decisions, and both make him look like a failure or a fraud. I used the word fraud because practically Hiruzen was never damaged on a personal level by any of these incidences. Instead, he gained lifelong administration, which I know I'll see in the comments too, and also earned a heroic legacy. Most importantly, he was almost always free from accountability, which is exactly why the village suffered under his rule. Ironically and unfortunately, others paid the price. Sasuke lost his family, Itachi lost his humanity, and Konoha suffered suffered immense devastation. Even if he didn't directly cause these tragedies, his leadership failed to prevent them. That's also why his relationship with his own son was strained. Asuma was against his relentless leadership. At first, I didn't agree with Asuma, but after seeing Hiruzen's actual performance as Hokage, I honestly switched to Team Asuma. He practically burned his own will of fire ideologically by letting criminals walk free and failing to be strong enough to stop major threats. Bro was Hokage, but had only mastered basic skills. No offense, but his students were smart enough to defeat him. No worries though, that's what we call karma. Every other villain in Naruto is honest about what they are. Orochimaru admits he is selfish and power hungry. Pain admits he wants the world to feel his pain. Naruto openly admits that he does terrible things for the village. But Hiruzen somehow convinced everyone that he was good, despite enabling or failing to stop almost every major tragedy. And in my dictionary, that's a fraud. Selling people lies about who you are for personal benefit and image. His greatest jutsu wasn't even in his arsenal. It was an illusion of competence and compassion. And once that fact, everything got exposed. People say he became weak with time, but honestly, I never saw him perform exceptionally enough to rely on his past reputation. We were convinced by his fantasy version, not his actual actions. In reality, Hiruzen avoided hard decisions every time and let others pay the price. He even compensated Naruto because of his restrictions. I won't deny that he was a great mentor. Yes, he fought 2 wars during his era. We can even say he made a sacrifice in the end, though in my opinion that was more due to his recklessness. But look at it this way, every Hokage made a massive difference to the village except Hiruzen. So in my opinion, he is a hidden villain that we need to recognize. And with that verdict, today's video ends. If you like it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.